So far, if you look at the videos, you'll see that the discussion or the transmission of signals was based on, voltage. Okay, all discussion has been done based on voltage mode transmission, as voltage levels have been transmitted with respect to supply rail, VDD and VSS. As can be seen, the driver switches the line between, line means interconnects between two supply values, VDD for 1 and VSS for, or ground for 0. And this all you have seen earlier, so I'll continue from here onwards. Another option is to use a low swing current mode transmission. Instead of voltage levels, current mode transmission may be possible, as shown here in this diagram. The driver injects a current I in into the interconnect line for a 1, transmission of 1, level 1, and a reverse current of minus I in for a 0 level. This induces a voltage wave of 2 into I in plus and minus, plus I in and minus I in, so 2 into I in into Z naught. Z naught is characteristic impedance of the interconnect as given here. So this much voltage is induced on the interconnect line, which ultimately gets absorbed into the parallel transmission resistance RT, shown here at the receiver end. The convergence time depends on how well the termination resistance is matched to the characteristic impedance. I mean, how RT is matched with Z0. This we have already seen. If it is matched, then loss will be less. While both approaches can be tuned to accomplish approximately the same performance levels, the current mode approach holds a definite edge in terms of dynamic power dissipation. Due to its immunity to power supply noise, it can operate at a much lower noise margin than the voltage mode network, hence also at a much lower swing. So these are the advantages of current mode transmission. The value of the voltage wave propagating over the transmission line can be as low as 100 millivolt. Instead of, say, ground to VDD earlier. That VDD may be 1 volt or 5 volt system, 5 volt. Okay. The main challenge in designing an efficient current mode circuit is the static power consumption. You know that current mode circuit is always going to conduct current. If you consider any circuits like differential amplifier, it will be always requiring certain amount of bias current. Without bias current, it cannot operate. So always static power dissipation is there. That is one disadvantage of current mode circuit. Based on these observations, current mode CMOS transmission systems have become popular in the area of high-speed off-chip interconnections. Means one chip to another chip, you want to transmit signals, so that can be done with current mode instead of voltage mode, because that needs high speed of operation, because you have to drive higher load capacitance also. Would not be surprised to see them emerge on chip as well in the foreseeable future. In future, maybe inside the chip also, not only outside interconnect or off-chip interconnect. Now we'll start these topics, because the interconnect related topics are over with the previous lectures and videos. Now we'll start I/O structures design and related topics. I/O structures is what? See, your core will be there inside where your main computation is going to occur, arithmetic, logic, unit, etc. But the chip, say processor, has to communicate with other chip, other peripheral chips, and that can be done with through some pin. Okay, and pin is stored at in a place. That place is a square shaped metal on which the pin is soldered or fixed. Okay, of course, bonding wire will be there to go into the inner area of the chip. So sometimes the pad simply means that a square shaped metal where pin is attached or soldered. But sometimes it also includes ESD protection circuits, electrostatic protection circuits. In that it may have diodes and resistance and capacitance, which altogether is forming the electrostatic discharge protection circuit. And you may have the transistors also, input or output transistors. And how they has to be sized, that is the topic of discussion today. So of all the CMOS circuit structures that will be covered in this text, IO structures require the most amount of circuit design expertise in association with detailed process knowledge. So it is important, as can be said, seen here, it is specifically written that it is needing expertise. Pad size is defined usually by the minimum size to which a bonding wire can be attached. Say this is a bonding wire, you have to attach. Bonding wire maybe, say this is your chip, for here you have to, from the chip core, you have to attach a bonding wire from this may be the pad on which pin is there in other side, and this side you have the bonding wire. So it is decided by or defined usually by the minimum size to which a bonding wire can be attached. It cannot be so thin or so less area. This is usually of the order of 100 to 150 micrometer square. Here is a different structure, IOPAD structures there. The spacing of pads is defined by the minimum pitch at which bonding machines can operate. Yes, certain machine is required which will be used for bonding. So the minimum spacing between two pad, here it is in the diagram is written 50 to 200 micrometer, whereas in the text it is written 150 to 200 micrometer. So this spacing should be this much. If that is the spacing, then very closely you cannot make the pad. So to make more pads or pins, nowadays chips are having so many pins, okay, compared to 8085 processor, which was 40 pins only, okay. Whereas nowadays see, and there's so many chips, pins are there, and hence pads will be there. So extremely high pad counts may be achieved by interdigitating. See, this is the way, interdigitating the pads as shown here. So this spacing, you can enter a wire or line and make pads at different positions or locations. Okay, so there are ways to make more pads because it needs specific spacing and dimensions. If you go through the design rules, say micro in design rules, for example, some of the students are doing layout, they are aware of microVision software for doing the layout. So there are rules also for pads. In that rules, I mean, whatever technology or foundry file is used, in that RP01 pad rule 01 pad size is 100 micrometer by 100 micrometer. Size means length and width is a square, so 100 micrometer square is the dimension. RP02 is spacing between these two is 100 micrometer, and RP03 surround passivation. This is surround passivation. Passivation is an insulating material. Silicon nitride may be the passivation layer to protect it. So that is about 5 micrometer. So of course, if you take different foundry file or design rules, then these dimensions may be different. Okay, as the technology is evolving and equipments are becoming bonding equipments or fabrication equipments are improving, it can make finer sizes. It can make finer sizes. So these, I mean, rules and the dimensions may be different. The power supply values VDD and VSS are externally applied to sources that enter the chip and moment via two separate pins. For example, in 885, what are the two pins? Can you remember? One was VCC 40th pin, or another one in the side 20th pin is for VSS or ground. So two pins are required, and at least two pins, okay, to connect or supply from external source the supply voltage and ground. The power supply distribution grid is a metal lines that provide the voltages to every part of the circuit. It must be designed with a geometrical patterning that allows a high packing density while providing the necessary current flow levels. I mean, thinking area also and current driving capability also. All wire cannot supply equal amount of current. Higher current should be flowing through wider and thicker interconnects. Okay, so how they are laid out, that we'll see in future slides. There are two problems in doing the interconnects, okay, for supply line and ground line. They are, one is electromigration, other one is IR drop. You know that voltage drop occurs because every line is having resistance. So current flowing through that means there will be voltage drop. At the one end, some voltage. At the other end of the long line, there will be less voltage because of this drop. And electromigration you have come across. What is that electromigration? Can anybody say? No idea. Due to higher current, atoms of the interconnect moves from one place to another place, creating void and hillock. Okay, so these are the two problems in making the interconnects. So easy solution is what? Make wider, so drop will be less, drop will be less, as well as electromigration will not be there. But this brute force solution consumes excess area. You cannot afford that. Silicon area should be saved. You have to route the voltage and ground, median ground in such a way that it doesn't carry. It doesn't take more silicon area. Here is one way to make the network, supply network. See that tree structures are the most common approach to designing the distribution scheme of VDD and VSS. The general idea is given here. The primary VDD line is designed to have width large enough to carry. See, this one is the much wider and thicker. Then a primary current is going through this I. Then it is routed through your secondary metal lines, like through which its width and thickness will be smaller, which is carrying I1. Then further, it is smaller amount of current will be routed through these even thinner wires, which will be carrying I2 on an average. This average current, of course. And then I3, and finally it is reaching to cell. Here, three levels of interconnects are shown. I mean, three different dimensions. It may be more or less. Okay, that we'll see in the diagram. Is it understood? The structure or diagram here showing some insight or understood anything? Yes. Remember that primary current I is the summation of I1, I2, whatever lines you are, maybe more lines will be there. It's not only one shown here. It is a symbol given on one place. This is one diagram which another diagram of this. See, the outer or top metal layers is thicker and wider, and at the cell at the bottom is maybe thinner. So M1 is at the bottom. Here is another diagram which shows how VDD and VSS lines are made. This is another example. Metal 6 at the top, which are thicker and wider compared to the metal 2, metal 1 even farther at the bottom. Here is another power distribution scheme shown here. Through this, your VDD are connected, and VSS, so these two pins are connected. Here is the VDD and VSS. From different locations through different pins, it is connected. Why from different? Because if one place, one pin is given the power supply, then if it is routed through a long wire, iron drop may be more. To avoid surrounding the chips, you may give from different pins also. Pad consists of square of top level metal of approximately 100 micrometer on a side and is soldered to a wire connecting to the package. The term pad sometimes refers to just the metal square and other times to the complete cell containing the metal, electrostatic dishes, protection circuitry, and I/O transistors. Now, various things we are going to discuss is pad types. VDD ground pad, output pad, input pad, bidirectional pad, and analog pads. And I don't know what we are going to discuss the output pads. What is output pad? What would be there in this pad? First and foremost, an output pad must have sufficient drive capability to achieve adequate rise and fall times into a given capacitive load. If the pad drives non-CMOS loads like TTL, then any required DC characteristics must also be met. Given a load capacitance and target rise and fall time, maybe capacitance may be more because it may be driving the off-chip interconnects. So capacitive load may be more, and target rise and fall time, maybe rise and fall time cannot be so long. That because circuit speed will be less in that case. The output transistor sizes may be calculated based on these things. One then generally needs buffering to present a lower load to the internal circuitry. An interstage ratio of between 2 to 10 is optimal for speed. Generally in a pad, an N stage, that is N is even, inverter circuit is used to give a non-inverting output stage. Buffer or driver of the line should be N number of inverter, where N is the even, so that inverting doesn't occur. The desired characteristic of the output pads are here. Output pads should have large off-chip capacitive load, about 2 to 50 picofarad driving capability. Means the output pad should be able to drive a capacitance up to 50 picofarad. Requires chain of more than one stage of larger buffers, as n number of buffers should be there. I mean, inverter should be there. N means there will be 8 or 12 or so. Guard rings to protect against latch up. We have understood what is latch up. So guard rings are required to prevent the latch up. Maybe double guard ring also. Wider output transistors to meet rise and fall time specifications. P plus inner guard rings and N plus outer guard rings in a NOL are required. So output transistors whose drains are connected to pad should have longer gates, L larger, to prevent avalanche breakdown, which we know as punch through damage when one voltage over voltage is applied to the gate. Okay, so these are the desired characteristics of output pad. See, we have already seen that length nowadays is very small, and due to widening of the depletion layer around the drain and source, punch through occurs. So you have to ensure that punch through is not occurring, because this drain may be connected to the outside world and the voltage may be unexpectedly high, and then depletion layer widening may be more and punch through may occur. So that to prevent this punch through, what is needed? You make L larger, so this may not happen. So you have to ensure that longer MOSFET is used. Few more points are there about output pads and guard rings. Because large transistors typically are used and IO currents are high, the susceptibility to latch up will occur when transients rise above VDD and below VSS. We have already discussed in latch up that if output node, the drain of the FETs, say inverter, consider the inverter, the output node if rises above VDD by 0.7 volt, then latch up may occur. Or if the output node falls below VSS by 0.7 volt, that is, it becomes minus 0.7 volt, then latch up may occur. So that thing is said here in a different way. Hence, it is required to separate N and P transistors using appropriate guard rings tied to the supply rails. If possible, IO transistors should be doubly guard ringed. This means that an NMOS should be encircled with P plus connection connected to VSS and an N plus and an NOL connected to VDD. PPMOS output transistor should be encircled with P plus ring connected to VDD and an N plus connected to substrate and VSS. The ring should be continuous in diffusion and strapped with metal where possible. Polysilicon cannot be used as a crossover because it breaks the continuity. Means guard rings you are applying around the, say, FET, and MOSFET or PMOSFET, it should be continuous. There should not be any breakage. The dummy collectors and guard rings serve to reduce the stray carriers injected into the substrate. With the drain diodes are forward biased. So dummy collectors also may be used. When driving out TTL loads with CMOS gates, the different switching thresholds have to be considered because supply voltage may be different. Say your CMOS circuits or chips may be having different voltage, and TTL may be having different voltage, maybe 5 volt there, and here it is maybe 3 volt or 2.5 volt. Okay, so VM of the inverters at the pad should be output pad or input pad should be designed in such a way that it is possible to drive the TTL circuits. The VIL of a TTL gate is 0.4 volts. You know, VIL and all, you are aware of it. See the output profile, VIL is 0.4 volts. The VIL of the CMOS gate is 0 volts. Thus, we have no problem in this aspect. The VIS for a TTL gate is 2.4 volt. The VIS for a CMOS gate is 5 volts for 5 volt supply system, and hence there is no problem here also. The low state, in the low state, the CMOS buffer must be capable of sinking 1.6 milliampere for a TTL, standard TTL load with a VOL of less than 0.4 volts. For typical driver transistors, this is usually not a problem. Okay, you know these figures you are aware of. TTL, we have circuits we have gone through in the third semester, and this we have discussed what is IIH max or what is IOL max, 16 milliampere, and can source up to 400 microampere, designated as. See, all these figures are discussed. I think this was the diagram I discussed during that third semester. Okay, so if you are forgetting, refer to those lectures once again. Now we are going to start input pad. In an input buffer, the first stage is connected directly to the external circuitry. Input buffer. Say this is your core and this is your pad. Okay, on which a pin is attached, and that pin will be connected to some another chip through off-chip interconnection. Here is your input buffer possibly. Okay, so this is input buffer. So this means that the gate of an N and P transistors may experience voltages beyond the normal operating range of the CMOS, because the gate here is connected to the some off-chip device through some off-chip interconnection, and that chip may be operating at higher voltage, and hence the gate, this gate of these two MOSFETs, and MOSFET and PMOSFETs, may get higher voltage here, and there is a possibility of oxide breakdown. If the voltage is more. The gate connection of an MOS transistor has a very high input resistance, that is 10 to the 12 to 10 to the 13 ohm, because we have the SiO2 here at the gate. The voltage at which the oxide punctures or breaks down is about 40 to 100 volts. Most probably that no circuit will be operated at that voltage here on the off-chip circuit, but how that voltage can be reached, that we have to see here. The voltage that can build up on gate may be determined with this equation: V equals to I delta T by Cg, where V is the gate voltage. I mean, because of the external circuit, it is coming and getting applied here. I, the charging current. You know that there is a huge interconnect capacitance in say 50 micro, what is that, picofarad or so, for example, in the picofarad range, not femtofarad. Internally it may be femtofarad. So that capacitance plus this COX plus this COX interconnect capacitance, all those are there. All the components of load capacitance think of. So this is having quite a good amount of capacitance, and that capacitance will be charged by that external chip voltage. So charging current may be, since capacitance is more, charging current may be high also. And delta T is the time taken to charge the gate. Cg is the gate capacitance here. So if I equals to 10 microampere, Cg equals to 0.03 picofarad, and delta T is 1 microsecond, the voltage that appears at the gate is about 330 volts. So this value is easily reached. So there is a possibility of breakdown, oxide breakdown at the input buffer. Usually a combination of resistance and diode. How to prevent it? ESD protection circuit we are talking about here. Here is the ESD protection circuit. Two diodes, D1, D2, one resistance R and one capacitor C. Usually a combination of resistance and diodes, clamps, are used to limit this potentially destructive voltage. A typical circuit is shown here. Clamp diode D1, D2 turn on if the voltage at node X rises above VDD or VSS. See, the diodes are connected in such a way that normally they are reverse biased. Normally they are reverse. VDD is given here, VSS ground is given here. Okay, so this is cathode side, this is anode side. Okay, so it is reverse biased. But yes, if from the external pin this voltage coming here is beyond the VDD by 0.7 volt even, this diode is going to be conductive. Okay, the D1 is going to conduct. Or otherwise, if the voltage at this pin coming from the external chip is below VSS by 0.7 volt, it is minus 0.7 volt instead of 0, then what will happen? This is 0, this is minus 0.7 volt. Then this D2 is going to conduct. And hence, what will happen? The current, whatever is going to flow through these diodes. And diodes are made robust. They will not be destroyed. And moreover, the R is there to limit the current passing through the diode. Okay. So the resistor R is used to limit the peak current that flows in the diodes in the event of an unusual voltage excursion here at the input pad. The values anywhere from 200 ohm to 3K kilo ohm are normally used. This resistance in conjunction with any input capacitance C, this is the C capacitor, will lead to an RC time constant which must be considered in high-speed circuits, because this resistance and the C is going to form a RC delay. So say, suppose this current has to go into the chip. Here is the chip coming and going in the chip. So if this RC is going to offer a high delay, circuit speed may be reduced here. That's what he is telling. You have to consider this one also. You cannot use the value of resistance and capacitance too high. So you have to keep a balance between all those. Is it understood? Karthik Rai, whatever discussion is going on, you are silent, not telling anything.
Yes, sir.
It is a very simple circuit, ESD protection circuit. And the concept is understood why it is required.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The input buffer is normally constructed with the gate length longer. L of the transistor should be longer. The normal to aid the breakdown characteristics, that is punch through should not occur, as we have already said. It is followed by several stages sufficient to drive the internal load. The VM of the input buffer is important. Why important? We'll see. If driven by non-CMOS circuitry, suppose from here some non-CMOS or TTL circuit was there, that is going to send the voltage signal here, through which is going to this internal chip. I am having a chip core. Okay, so VM of this is important. VM of this inverter. We know what is VM, right? What is VM? Anybody remembering? Anybody is remembering what is VM?
Sir, VM should be VDD by 2.
VDD should be VDD by 2 ideally. Okay, ideally it should be VDD by 2, so that rise current, rise time and fall time, TPHL and TPLH are equal. Okay, that is good. But sometimes it may not be good, so we are going to discuss here. For example, when interfacing TTL logic to CMOS, it is advantageous to place the VM of the input inverter in the middle of the TTL switching range. TTL switching range you have to consider. It's a 5 volt. TTL is 5 volt. TTL is using 5 volt. So VM should be what? Ideally, it should be 2.5 volt in a 5 volt system. If it is a 5 volt system, 2.5 volt should be the VM ideally, but that is not correct. Why? Because we have to see. For TTL, VOL is 0.4 volts and VOH is 2.4 volt, right? That we have seen in the output profile. If you see, yeah, output profile, VOL is 0.4 volt and VOH mean is 2.4 volt. Minimum voltage, output voltage, minimum output voltage that can be considered as high. That is VOH mean, and VOL max is the maximum output voltage that can be considered as low. So So it is advantageous to place the VM of the input inverter in the middle of the TTL switching range. For TTL, VOL equals to 0.4 volts and VOH equals 2.4 volts. Thus, the VM should be set near 1.4 volts. Okay, not this. Now, what are the desired or expected characteristic of input pad? The input pad may need thick gate oxide to avoid gate oxide breakdown. It may need Schmitt-Tiger having reasonable hysteresis. It may need low skewed inverter. As you see here, we need a low skewed inverter. Are you understanding? Low skewed inverter. We are not making VM equals to 2.5 volt or so. We are making in MOSFET stronger here. Low skewed inverter be required. It may be required to perform some level conversion and noise filtering. That is also the duty of this input pad. For example, an input pad might receive a TTL signal of VOL equals to 0.4 volts and VOH equals to 0.4 volt. If the pad operates at 5 volt, it should use a low skewed inverter with VM equals to 2.4 volt. Now, what are the purpose? What is the purpose of input resistor in the ESD? ESD means electrostatic discharge circuit, protection circuit. What is the purpose of R? It is going to limit the current when it is an unexpected event is occurring. So diode will be forward biased, current will flow. So that current will be prevented or can be limited rather. Then what is the purpose of ESD potential circuit diodes? Diode purpose. You understand now. What is the purpose of input capacitance? This and the capacitance here, input capacitance. It absorb the shocks, initial shock. If some excess current is trying to come, then it will be absorbed by this capacitance. It will be charged rather. Okay, all load will not come on this oxide capacitance of the MOSFETs. So now we are going to talk about the tri-state and bidirectional pads. Here's the diagram of tri-state buffer. The circuit here. You see how it is tri-stated. Can you understand and tell me? Explain. This is the normal question I used to ask, and these are the very good understanding you might have developed in digital system design subject. And NAND gates are enabled with 1 or NOR with 0. If a NOR is enabled with 0, other input gets complemented. Same is the case of NAND also. If it is enabled with 1, other input gets complemented. So this is fundamental things about the NAND gate and NOR gate. Where here we have the NAND gate, so I have put here for your better understanding. See whether it is a tri-stated gate or not. Suppose data is coming from 80. This is the chip side, your say 8085, sending data through 80, the data line. Coming here, it has to be sent to this pad from which it will be going somewhere externally. Okay, going somewhere external chip, for example. Okay. Now, this output enable means suppose you are giving a 0. What is happening? Whether this data is going into this pad or not, that you check. Can you check and tell me? Is going to enable with 0 or 1? It is a NAND gate. It is enabled with 1. Let us see whether it is doing or not. So 1 is here, and this 0 has come here. So this is also enabled because NOR gate is enabled with 0. What is going to be the output of NAND gate and NOR gate? Tell. Tell.
Sir, data bar.
Data bar. Data bar. So 1 is the input. Data bar means 0 is going to come here. That is what you want to say?
Yes, sir.
Here, what is going to go?
Sir, same.
It is also 0, right? One input is 0.
Yes,
is it so? NAND gate. One input 0, other input 1. What is the output?
1.
So you are wrong. Its output is going to be high. So 1 is coming here at the top, that is input of the MOSFET, and at the bottom, as you said, is a NOR gate. One input is 0. One input 0 means, and other input is high. High means output is complemented 1. This one is coming here. So this MOSFET, NMOSFET is on. NMOSFET is on means this point is pulled down to 0. Pulled down to 0. So at the pad, what do you get? Data is going, or complement of data is going. What is happening? Is it correctly? We are analyzing correctly. Data, you are sending a data. Is it going to pad with
No,
this
sir.
discussion? No. Then
No, sir.
somewhere we have
it is in
made
high.
mistake.
Sir, it is in enable is 0, so it should be in high impedance state.
It is in high impedance state. Let me clear these things so that we can. So let us now discuss. We are sending a data of 1, which is coming from, say, processor at 0. Want to send it through this pad to some chip, external chip, for example, external chip. So how we are going to send it? If we enable, then only data will go. So enabling with 1 is possible or 0 is possible. That we have to understand first.
1, sir.
1. Okay, let us see whether it is enabling to send this data to this point or not. That is our point. So if it is 1, so 0 is coming here. Okay, here is 1. So 1, 0, what is the output of the NOR gate?
0.
It is 0. So this is 0 means MOSFET is off. This MOSFET is off. Now let us look at here. This 1 is coming here. This is also 1. Both are 1. NAND gate. So output is what?
0.
0. This is on. So VDD is going to be connected to this pad, and 1 is available, which will be going to the chip. Means this data
Yes.
is transferred to this chip.
Yes, sir.
If you are enabling with output enable equals to 1. If otherwise, if you do, what is going to happen? Means you are sending same data, you are disabling, means data is available up to this point from, say, 80 of 885, but processor has not sent the enable signal. It is not enabling. Still, this line coming from processor also. It is also coming from processor. Remember that control is going to come from processor only. So it is 0. It is not yet enabled. So what is going to happen? Let us see. At this point, what will happen? This is 1. So this is also 1. Both are 1 means what is the output?
High impedance.
No. NOR gate output, you tell.
No, okay.
Both are 1. NOR gate output is what? You are forgetting NOR gate.
0 only, sir.
This is your NOR gate. For your easy reference, this is your NOR gate. Both are high. Okay, both are high means they are off, they are on. So output is what? 0. Okay. So output 0. So this is off. This is 0 and this is 1. What is the output?
1.
Output is 1 because your NOR is like NAND is like this. This is out. Okay. See 1 0 1 0. Pull down path is broken, and one MOSFET is conducting, and hence out is 1. Is it understood or any doubt? So this is 1 means it is also non-conducting. So this is at high impedance state. Okay, nothing is, I mean, this pad from this side, at least from this chip side, this pad is hanging. Okay, it is neither connected to VDD nor connected to ground. This is what tri-state buffer works. Now let us go further. Let us finish it up. Now bidirectional things. This input pad and output pad. This is the things which can be, instead of this circuit tri-state buffer, this also is an alternative tri-state buffer. So out is going to go here, and you have the enable signal here. This is a transmission gate TG. Okay. Once it is enabled with 1, obviously this is 0, so switch is on. The switch is on, and D out you are sending, say 1. So this is 0 here, and this is 1 here. Okay. Once enabled, your data is reaching here to this pin, and through this it can go to the output outside world. Okay, outside world, say external chip here. Now this side is what? This is, so this is output pad. You can say output pad, tri-stated output pad. It is tri-stated output pad. See, because pad means not only the square shaped metal, it may also include the circuit like this transistor, then some resistor and capacitance, etc., diode, etc. So I am calling pad. Okay. Of course, here separately it is put here where pin is actually soldered. This may also include in this. Anyway, now this side is what? Input pad. As we have already discussed, through this pin, through this resistor, which this resistor is going to limit the currents in these diodes, and this is absorbing the initial shock, and then this is the buffer. 1 pair is shown here, it may be more. Okay, is it understood? Yes or no? How the input and output pad, bidirectional pad, can be designed? Understood, Prajwal?
Yes, sir.
Harsh Tripathi, are you listening?
Yes, sir.
Is it understood?
Yes, sir.
Something about analog circuit, analog pads is also given here. No buffering is needed in this. Production circuit must not distort the voltages. Analog inputs and outputs connect to simple metal pads and then directly to the on-chip analog circuit without any digital buffering or driver. Analog pads still require some protection circuits. So now miscellaneous pads, like pads may also require latches and resistors. Yes.
We have another class now.
Okay, then I will stop here, and here onwards we will start the next class in the next tomorrow.